a donut, copper!
Oh!
Come to Papa.
House, Mrs. Otterton, okay?
Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Q-Man channel. I'm so glad you could join us today. If you're new here, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if you enjoy the content. Today, we are going to be diving into a fantastic film, Zootopia from 2016. The bustling metropolis of Zootopia, a place where predator and prey supposedly live in harmony, serves as the backdrop for a determined young rabbit named Judy Hops. Driven by a childhood ambition, fueled by witnessing the unfair treatment of smaller animals, she dreams not just of being a cop, but the very first rabbit officer in the Zootopia Police Department. Her relentless pursuit of this goal contrasts sharply with the skepticism she faces from her family and the established force, who see her as physically inadequate for the tough job. Upon graduating at the top of her class at the academy, a testament to her sheer grit and agility, Judy is assigned to the precinct in Tundra Town, a less glamorous post she views as a deliberate sidelining by Chief Bogo, a massive Cape Buffalo whose own career history likely involves overcoming significant bureaucratic hurdles to reach his position. Undeterred, Judy immediately jumps on a missing mammal case involving an otter, which leads her into the seedier parts of the city. It is here she encounters Nick Wilde, a cynical, street-smart red fox with a flair for smooth-talking and petty scams, who profits from the ingrained prejudices against his species. Nick, it turns out, had his own deeply scarring childhood experience involving a humiliating attempt to join the Junior Ranger Scouts, which taught him that, if the world expects you to be a con artist, you might as well excel at it. Judy, desperate for leads, blackmails Nick into helping her solve the case, forcing this unlikely pair into an uneasy partnership. Their investigation takes them through various districts, from the humid streets of Little Rodentia to the icy expanse of Tundra Town, revealing that several predator mammals have gone missing, exhibiting signs of a strange, almost savage regression. Judy's relentless enthusiasm clashes constantly with Nick's jaded pragmatism, yet their complementary skills, her adherence to procedure, and his intimate knowledge of the city's underbelly, begin to yield results. The case leads them to a clandestine operation run by Dawn Bellwether, the seemingly meek assistant mayor, who is revealed to be the mastermind. Bellwether, seeking to reverse the societal power structure, has been using a potent serum derived from toxic nightberries to make predators regress into their primal states. Her motivation stems from generations of perceived oppression by the larger, dominant herbivores. When Judy inadvertently reveals this information publicly, fearing the consequences of keeping such a dangerous secret, she causes mass panic. Her press conference, intended to celebrate the case's breakthrough, instead exacerbates the very divisions she sought to bridge, leading to widespread fear and segregation against predators across Zootopia. This public failure deeply wounds Judy, causing her to retreat from the force, feeling she has done more harm than good. It is Nick who finds her in her hometown, offering the compassion and understanding she hadn't received from anyone else, especially not the system she trusted. He reminds her that intentions matter, but so does accountability. They eventually uncover the final piece of the puzzle, Bellwether's hidden lab, where she is synthesizing a gas form of the serum, intending to use it on the entire predator population to cement herbivore dominance forever. Working together, Judy and Nick expose Bellwether's plot, utilizing Nick's skills in deception and Judy's newly refined sense of situational awareness to record Bellwether's confession. The public learns the truth, and the panic subsides. In the aftermath, Zootopia begins to heal. Judy returns to the force, wiser and more empathetic, understanding that true progress requires acknowledging systemic failures rather than just personal ambition. Nick, inspired by Judy's unwavering belief in him and seeing a genuine opportunity for change, joins the Zootopia Police Department as Judy's partner. The film concludes with the two of them, the rabbit and the fox, confidently patrolling the city, a symbol of the hard-won, complicated harmony that defines Zootopia. The arrival of Judy Hops at the Zootopia Police Department was immediately fraught with the tension of expectation versus reality. Her diminutive stature, perpetually underestimated by Chief Bogo, whose own rise in the ranks undoubtedly involved navigating much larger physical and psychological barriers in a force dominated by bigger mammals, only fueled her need to prove herself with tireless effort. She didn't just want to meet the standards, she wanted to rewrite them, leading Bogo to assign her the seemingly innocuous duty of parking enforcement, a punishment thinly veiled as an entry-level assignment. Yet it was amidst ticketing illegally parked vehicles that Judy's inherent nose for trouble, or perhaps just her refusal to ignore anything out of place, led her directly to the labyrinthine disappearance of Mr. Otterton. This pursuit dragged her into the shadowy corners of Tundra Town, the icy district smelling perpetually of fish and cold compromise. There she encountered Nick Wilde, a fox whose slick charm was as polished as the con jobs he ran on unsuspecting tourists. Nick's career as a hustler wasn't a choice so much as a survival mechanism, etched into him by that long-ago rejection from the Junior Ranger Scouts, a formative event that taught him cynicism was the only reliable currency. Judy, viewing the world in clear moral binaries, law or crime, found Nick utterly exasperating, a walking contradiction to the very ideals she swore to uphold. Forcing him into the investigation by leveraging his illegal dealings felt like a necessary, if distasteful, professional maneuver. As they dove deeper, the partnership was a constant friction point. Judy, clinging to her earnest belief in the system that had failed to prepare her for the city's true complexities, often bristled at Nick's casual dismissal of rules. Nick, conversely, saw her earnestness as dangerous naivete, a vulnerability that Zootopia would inevitably exploit. Their journey through the humid tropics of Sahara Square and the frigid air of Tundra Town revealed a terrifying pattern. Predators weren't just missing, they were reverting, losing their cognitive functions, becoming terrifyingly feral. This transformation, they realized, was not natural but induced, a deliberate act of calculated terror. The exposure of Dawn Bellwether was a slow reveal of rot beneath a veneer of civic dedication. Bellwether, the picture of diligent, overlooked bureaucracy, harbored a deep-seated resentment, a desire to flip the script on the supposed natural order that had long favored the large herbivores. Her serum, derived from the obscure, toxic nightberries, was the ultimate equalizer, designed not just to harm, but to dismantle the very identity of the predators. When Judy, in a rush of moral clarity born from her unwavering commitment to transparency, a trait essential for any officer trying to clean up a corrupt system, broadcasted the findings prematurely, the fallout was catastrophic. The raw fear that erupted in the city wasn't just chaos, it was a confirmation of the very prejudices Judy had hoped to dismantle. Seeing the genuine terror in the eyes of her fellow citizens, even those she sought to protect, was a gut punch. It was the moment her shining ambition tarnished under the weight of unintended consequences, driving her to question if her idealism was a liability. It was Nick who pulled her back from the brink of self-exile. His quiet, unforced empathy stemmed from a shared understanding of being perpetually judged by one species. He didn't preach, he simply offered the acceptance that the institution had denied her. This shared vulnerability forged an unbreakable bond, transforming their initial obligation into genuine respect. When they traced the final stage of Bellwether's plan, the mass dissemination via gas, they approached it not as a cop and a criminal, but as two outsiders who understood the mechanisms of deception. Nick's talent for performance and mimicry became the perfect weapon against Bellwether's calculated lies, securing the confession that vindicated Judy's initial instincts while validating Nick's street wisdom. The ensuing reconciliation in Zootopia was messy, characterized by apologies whispered in quiet corners and systemic reevaluations rather than grand, sweeping gestures. Judy returned to the force with a profound humility, recognizing that fighting for equality meant understanding the nuances of fear and history, not just enforcing black and white laws. Nick's entry into the ZPD was equally significant. It was a testament to Judy's faith and the possibility of reinvention. Seeing the fox trade his ill-gotten gains for a badge, standing shoulder to shoulder with the rabbit who once saw him as merely a means to an end, visually represented the fragile, hard-won détente in Zootopia. They became an iconic patrol duo, a testament that true partnership in a diverse city requires both the unwavering belief in a better future and the cynical understanding of how that future can be corrupted. Judy's initial triumph at the academy, graduating top of her class, was a furious act of self-assertion against every skeptical glance she'd ever received, a silent declaration that biology did not dictate capability. That raw energy, however, quickly met the cold, hard reality of Bogo's precinct, a place where ambition was quickly cooled by bureaucratic inertia. The parking enforcement assignment, designed to keep the enthusiastic rabbit busy with trivialities, ironically provided the perfect vantage point for her obsessive attention to detail to snag the scent of something truly rotten, the Otterton case. She treated every improperly parked car like a clue in a larger conspiracy, her relentless ticketing an almost manic pursuit of order in a city defined by chaos. Her forced alliance with Nick Wilde was a study in contrasting methodologies. Nick, the fox whose survival instincts were honed by years of navigating the predatory assumptions of Zootopia, viewed every interaction as a negotiation or a potential scam. His default setting was skepticism, born from the deep, searing humiliation of being rejected by peers who saw his species before his character. When Judy cornered him, her moral outrage palpable, Nick didn't resist out of guilt, but out of professional annoyance at having his lucrative, low-risk hustle interrupted. He saw Judy as a walking liability, someone who believed too fiercely in the inherent goodness of the system that had actively excluded him. Yet, he couldn't deny the thrill of a real, high-stakes puzzle, something far more substantial than swindling tourists out of overpriced trinkets. The descent into the mystery of the savage predators was visceral. As they tracked the missing mammals, the initial thrill of the chase morphed into genuine dread. The sight of these creatures reverting, the loss of their carefully constructed civility, was horrifying to Judy, mirroring her own deepest fears about nature's unruliness. For Nick, the regression felt tragically familiar. It was what the world already expected predators to be, only made violently real. Their arguments in the cramped confines of their shared, haphazard investigation space weren't just about police procedure versus street smarts. They were ideological battles fought by two beings who felt perpetually forced into societal boxes: the idealized, overachieving herbivore and the naturally suspect predator. Dawn Bellwether's revelation was a masterstroke of dramatic irony. The meek, mouse-like second-in-command, whose entire career was built on being invisible and deferential to the larger mammals, was the architect of Zootopia's potential downfall. Her motivation was rooted in a deep-seated generational bitterness against the perceived domination by large herbivores. Judy's decision to go public wasn't just a commitment to transparency. It was an almost naive belief that the truth presented clearly would instantly solve the problem. The ensuing panic, the immediate, reflexive turning of neighbors against neighbors, struck Judy with the force of physical assault. The image of predators suddenly caged, viewed with the same fear she once held as a kit looking at a fox, was a devastating confirmation that her well-intentioned actions had tragically amplified the city's existing fault lines. She retreated, her dream of unity shattered by the reality of ingrained prejudice. It was Nick's intervention in her quiet despair that proved pivotal. He didn't offer platitudes about hope. He offered the shared language of outsidership. He understood that sometimes the biggest enemy wasn't a criminal mastermind, but the crushing weight of public expectation and judgment. That moment of true connection, the cynical fox ministering to the broken idealist rabbit, recalibrated their mission. They weren't just solving a crime. They were fighting to prove that their own partnership was possible. Their final confrontation with Bellwether utilized Nick's greatest skill, his ability to convincingly mimic and manipulate appearances, turning the tables on the petite mastermind who thought she could control perception. The aftermath cemented their roles. Judy returned to the ZPD with a seasoned understanding that justice is not simply the application of rules, but the painstaking work of rebuilding trust on a foundation of acknowledged vulnerability. Nick's induction into the force wasn't just a job. It was an act of profound public rehabilitation and personal commitment. Watching the diminutive rabbit and the cunning fox, once diametrically opposed by societal decree, now sharing a squad car, underscored the film's quiet conclusion. Zootopia was not a perfect utopia, but a continuous, conscious effort where the most unlikely allies had to work together to keep the peace from fracturing again. The weight of their shared victory settled upon Judy and Nick not as a celebratory applause, but as a sober recognition of the meticulous maintenance required to sustain their delicate ecosystem of peace. Judy, no longer the starry-eyed rookie whose ambition outpaced her nuance, approached her police work with a newfound gravity. She understood that her youthful zeal, while necessary for initiating change, could be destructive without the tempering influence of caution and empathy. Qualities Nick possessed in abundance, honed by years of having to constantly assess threat and motive. Her patrols with Nick became less about ticking off boxes on a procedure manual and more about reading the subtle cues of anxiety or relief in the faces of the animals they encountered, recognizing that fear, once unleashed, leaves scars deeper than any nightberry serum. Nick, for his part, found the structured environment of the ZPD both restrictive and strangely liberating. The uniform felt alien at first, a costume he worried the city would instantly see through, waiting for him to slip up and revert to his old ways. Yet, Judy's unwavering faith acted as an unexpected anchor. His sharp observational skills, previously dedicated to spotting marks for a con, were now repurposed to detect genuine distress or the lingering shadows of Bellwether's influence. He became the department's unofficial translator for the underworld, navigating the subtle language of unspoken fear among predators who worried their initial regression might be mistaken for a relapse. A fear Chief Bogo, now slightly less rigid, had to consciously work to overcome in his command style. Bogo, Realizing the value of Nick's background, a background he himself likely possessed in navigating the politics of a large, intimidating organization, began to delegate tasks that required a nuanced understanding of Zootopia's hidden currents, acknowledging that effective policing sometimes required bending the rules he once rigidly upheld. Their partnership matured into a seamless operation, where Judy often steered the moral compass, pushing for engagement and transparency, while Nick ensured they didn't accidentally alienate the very communities they were trying to reassure. When they mediated a dispute in the Rainforest District involving resource scarcity that threatened to trigger territorial instincts, it was Nick who first recognized the panic underlying the aggressive posturing of a jaguar, relating it back to the primal insecurity Bellwether had exploited. Judy, remembering the damage caused by her premature announcement, spoke carefully, emphasizing shared security rather than species difference, utilizing the trust she had painstakingly earned back from the public. They were no longer just enforcing laws, they were actively engaged in the slow, continuous labor of communal reassurance, demonstrating daily that cooperation was a habit that needed constant rehearsal, lest the old prejudices, the convenient assumptions about what an animal should be, resurface and threaten the fragile truce of the metropolis. The early days of Judy and Nick patrolling together were a public spectacle, a living, breathing testament to Zootopia's precarious progress. Every stop they made, every intersection they crossed, felt like a performance judged by the silent, assessing eyes of every passerby. Judy carried the burden of representation heavily. She felt she had to be impeccably correct, not just for her own career, but to validate the leap of faith the department, and Nick especially, had taken. She noticed the way smaller herbivores would subtly relax their posture when they saw her rabbit ears, yet stiffen slightly when Nick, ever the picture of relaxed confidence in his uniform, sat beside her. It was a constant low-level hum of societal expectation that she had to navigate, a reminder that her idealism needed constant grounding in reality. Nick, conversely, seemed to revel in the absurdity of his new station, treating the police cruiser almost like an extension of his old customized vehicle. His smooth talking, once used to extract money, was now deployed to de-escalate tense situations. He had an almost uncanny ability to read when a situation was tipping toward species-based panic, often intercepting Judy before she could launch into a purely procedural response. For instance, when dealing with a minor road rage incident between a rhinoceros and a gazelle in Savannah Central, Judy was ready to write up citations for reckless driving, but Nick calmly stepped in. He recognized the rhino's agitation wasn't aggression, but deep-seated stress from the commute, recognizing that feeling of being cornered and overwhelmed. He used a few well-placed, slightly teasing comments about traffic patterns, the very things he used to exploit, to diffuse the rhino's temper, guiding the conversation away from potential territoriality and back towards solvable traffic violations. It was a nuanced application of his street education that no academy textbook could ever teach. Chief Bogo, observing this unlikely synergy, found his own strict adherence to the rules beginning to soften, though he would never admit it aloud. His experiences leading a large department had taught him that true authority wasn't about physical intimidation, but about effective deployment of diverse talent. He started trusting Nick's instincts on cases involving organized crime or the gray areas of the financial district, areas where Judy's clean record offered no insight. Bogo saw in Nick a necessary cynicism that balanced Judy's overwhelming optimism, realizing that a law enforcement body without an element of healthy suspicion was just as vulnerable as one riddled with corruption. He even started using phrases like Nick's gut feeling in internal briefings, a shocking concession for a buffalo who likely spent decades fighting stereotypes himself. Their ongoing challenge lay in the lingering psychological fallout of the Bellwether crisis. The city was not healed, it was merely quiet. Judy and Nick often found themselves addressing community meetings in the smaller, historically segregated districts, places like Little Rodentia, where the trauma of nearly being overrun by engineered savagery remained freshest. It was here that the true depth of their connection was tested and solidified. Judy would speak about the necessity of believing in the system, but always included the caveat, learned painfully, that systems must be held accountable. Nick, standing beside her, would often finish her thoughts, his delivery infused with a weary authenticity that resonated deeply with those who felt perpetually dismissed. He didn't preach redemption. He spoke about making pragmatic choices for a safer, less stressful existence, something the smaller animals deeply craved. They were building a bridge, not with grand pronouncements, but through the small, consistent acts of mutual respect demonstrated every shift they worked together. The continued normalization of their partnership brought a new layer of complexity, the integration of Nick's past into his present duties. While he excelled at reading the room and employing his charisma for good, the remnants of his former life occasionally surfaced. There were times, particularly when investigating scams targeting the elderly or financially vulnerable, that Nick's intimate knowledge of criminal methodology was invaluable, yet it also brought pangs of self-consciousness. He worried that cracking down too hard on a small-time hustler might be perceived as overcompensation, a desperate attempt to prove his reformed status to Judy and the rest of the force. Judy, sensitive to this internal struggle, developed a keen awareness of when to step back and let Nick lead, particularly when the suspect might share a similar background or motivation to the one that shaped him. She trusted his judgment in these morally ambiguous situations far more than her own textbook knowledge. Their commitment to rebuilding trust extended beyond the immediate community interactions and into internal department culture. A subtle but significant shift occurred when they were tasked with reviewing cold cases related to discriminatory policing, incidents where predators felt they were unfairly targeted by officers before Bellwether's plot was exposed. Judy brought her legalistic thoroughness to the review, meticulously cross-referencing every stop and search record. Nick, however, provided the essential emotional context. He could explain why a certain area had a higher rate of stops for foxes, not just that the statistics showed it. He articulated the feeling of being perpetually watched, a sensation he lived every day before joining the ZPD. This combined approach allowed the department to not only address past errors legally, but also to understand the human cost, prompting genuine internal policy changes rather than just public apologies. Their collaborative success began to attract unwanted attention from outside the ZPD. Rumors started circulating among the city's political and business elite, those who benefited from the old, stratified order, that the rabbit-fox duo was becoming too effective, too popular, and worst of all, too influential in challenging the established hierarchies. A quiet lobbying effort began to place subtle roadblocks in their path, perhaps delaying necessary equipment upgrades or assigning them to deliberately tedious, morale-sapping administrative tasks. This renewed pressure, however, only solidified the bond between Judy and Nick. They had faced down engineered savagery and societal panic. A little bureaucratic sabotage was merely another form of low-level con artistry they were now expertly equipped to dismantle. They understood, implicitly, that maintaining Zootopia's harmony required constant vigilance against those who preferred the quiet efficiency of division over the messy work of true integration. The subtle bureaucratic resistance they encountered only served to sharpen their focus, transforming their partnership from a necessary alliance into a true professional unit that operated almost outside the conventional structure of the ZPD. Nick, with his innate skepticism regarding authority, was the first to spot the patterns in the delayed paperwork and deliberately inconvenient reassignments. He recognized the hallmark of passive aggression, the quiet sabotage favored by those unwilling to fight openly, but desperate to maintain their entrenched power. He'd often quipped to Judy, leaning against the cruiser, that bureaucracy was just a con game played with triplicate forms instead of slick patter, and he knew how to spot a rigged game. Judy, drawing on her sharpened political awareness gained from the Bellwether debacle, realized that directly confronting these minor officials would only feed the narrative that she, the idealistic rabbit was overreacting. Instead, she employed a strategy born of Nick's influence: strategic visibility. If they couldn't get the paperwork processed conventionally, they made sure their successful case closures were publicized directly by the mayor's office, effectively bypassing the mid-level resistance. Judy leveraged her newfound reputation for integrity, framing every delayed resource as a direct obstacle to public safety, making it politically costly for officials to impede them overtly. Their shared workload began to blur the lines between their personal lives and their duties, but in a healthy, supportive way. When Nick was called upon to testify in a complex fraud case, his anxiety about appearing too polished or too cunning was visible. Judy sat in the gallery, radiating calm support, her presence a nonverbal assurance that his testimony was valued for its truth, not judged for its source. Similarly, when Judy faced scrutiny from internal affairs after an unconventional yet successful raid in a volatile part of Tundra Town, Nick defended her actions not by quoting regulations, but by vividly painting the necessary context of the threat, appealing to the human element of necessity that the rulebook often ignored. Their contrasting skills, once a source of friction, had become perfectly complementary lenses through which to view the city. Judy saw the letter of the law and the immediate need for order. Nick saw the underlying human or mammal motivations, the history of slights, and the easiest way around an obstacle, legal or otherwise. They were the equilibrium Zootopia needed, one half passionately striving for the ideal, the other pragmatically ensuring that the striving didn't cause collateral damage. The city was beginning to internalize their image, the determined rabbit and the redeemed fox, as the new standard, a living demonstration that species difference could be irrelevant when faced with a shared commitment to the messy, complicated business of true community. This evolving dynamic meant that their downtime, when rare, was as telling as their most intense stakeouts. Judy, still prone to obsessive organization, found herself intentionally allowing minor clutter in her desk area, a small concession to the comfortable disorder that surrounded Nick. She'd often watch him during moments of quiet, noticing the subtle shifts in his posture when he felt truly respected versus when he felt merely tolerated. This emotional intelligence became her greatest asset. She learned to read the shadows of prejudice that lingered even after Bellwether's downfall, understanding that systemic change moved at the pace of molasses, while public perception could snap back in an instant. Nick, shedding the last vestiges of his hard-edged cynicism, started showing moments of surprising idealism, albeit filtered through his characteristic sarcasm. He began mentoring some of the younger predator recruits at the precinct, coyotes and ferrets who were navigating their own minefields of assumption. He wouldn't lecture them on morality. Instead, he'd teach them the art of the unimpeachable alibi, the perfect deflection, and how to present themselves so professionally that their species became irrelevant background noise. His real lesson, delivered through these tactical teachings, was self-possession. Own your narrative, or let others write it for you. He'd always looked to Judy for a nod of approval after these sessions, a habit that spoke volumes about where he now sought validation. Chief Bogo, witnessing this mentorship, made his most telling professional adjustment yet. When a major investigation required infiltrating a highly exclusive, high-stakes gambling ring run by powerful figures in the financial district, a place where traditional police tactics would be instantly recognized and foiled, Bogo didn't send a SWAT team. He sent Nick, explicitly tasking him with using his old skills under the strict supervision of Judy, who would serve as the operational oversight, ensuring the infiltration remained legally sound. This move acknowledged that Nick's criminal expertise was now a necessary, legitimate tool for law enforcement. It was a tacit admission that Zootopia's harmony relied not just on virtue, but on the smart, controlled deployment of formerly illicit knowledge. The pressure, however, wasn't only external. They began to develop an almost telepathic shorthand in tense situations, finishing each other's sentences or knowing precisely when to deploy a joke versus a firm command. Once, during a hostage negotiation involving a territorial grizzly bear whose small business was failing, a modern echo of Bellwether's economic resentment, Judy started outlining the legal options for bankruptcy relief. Nick cut in softly, using the bear's name, acknowledging the deep shame of failure before discussing financials. He spoke of the pressure to provide, a vulnerability Judy couldn't articulate with the same lived experience. It was in these moments where Nick navigated the emotional terrain that Judy's directness might alienate, that their partnership transcended mere collaboration. It became a symbiotic necessity for effective governance in a city still grappling with its own nature. They weren't just partners. They were two halves of the city's conscience, constantly checking each other's blind spots to ensure Zootopia moved forward, one careful, complicated step at a time. The symbiosis they achieved became the unofficial benchmark for Zootopia's evolving social contract. Their joint success in the high-stakes infiltration of the financial ring, Nick utilizing his deep, ingrained understanding of illicit transactions while Judy meticulously documented every exchange to ensure evidentiary integrity, sent a clear message up the chain of command. Blending disparate skill sets yields superior results. This victory prompted a rare public commendation from the mayor, one where Judy stood rigidly correct, observing how the applause for Nick, the reformed con artist, felt far more earned and fraught with significance than any praise she'd received for simply graduating top of her class. For Nick, accepting the accolades was a strange mix of pride and lingering skepticism. He knew how easily praise could turn to condemnation. This sustained success inevitably led to deeper professional challenges that tested the very foundation of their trust. A wave of disappearances began plaguing the outskirts of the city, involving various species but sharing a common thread. The victims were all influential figures who had publicly supported Bellwether's conviction, suggesting a calculated, targeted revenge plot by some hidden loyalist faction. The investigation plunged them into the murky world of Zootopia's elite, a place where corruption wasn't about street scams, but about leveraging wealth and influence to rewrite regulations. Judy found herself stymied by layers of corporate secrecy and legal maneuvering, the kind of complex paper-based obfuscation that even Nick's street smarts struggled to penetrate without hard evidence. It was during this investigation that Nick faced a profound internal conflict. To gain the necessary access codes to a secure server, he had to briefly reconnect with an old, highly untrustworthy acquaintance, a weasel known for selling secrets to the highest bidder. The act of making that call, of deliberately re-engaging with his dishonest past, even for a righteous cause, caused visible distress. He confessed his apprehension to Judy later, not fearing her judgment of the contact, but the impact on her perception of him. Judy's response was telling of her growth. Instead of lecturing on maintaining distance from the underworld, she simply asked, "What do you need from me to make sure this goes exactly as planned, and no further?" She acknowledged that his past wasn't a liability to be managed, but a resource that needed careful, controlled deployment. Their pursuit led them to uncover a shadowy network, attempting to discredit the current administration and frame predators once again, hoping to spark a second wave of segregation based on the narrative that predators were inherently untrustworthy, even when trying to do good. The climax involved a tense standoff in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city, a fittingly subterranean setting for a plot rooted in buried resentment. Judy's quick tactical thinking secured the perimeter, while Nick, utilizing his familiarity with dark, confined spaces and his ability to mimic voices perfectly, tricked the ringleader, a normally unassuming badger, into revealing the full scope of the conspiracy on a hidden recording device they'd planted. The badger, like Bellwether before him, underestimated the combined power of the rabbit who refused to quit, and the fox who finally believed in something worth fighting for, securing another fragile victory for Zootopia's hard-won peace. The resolution of the revenge plot, set against the echoing dampness of the forgotten tunnels, confirmed a profound truth for Judy and Nick. Zootopia's challenges would never truly cease. They would only change shape. The victory over the Badgers' conspiracy wasn't a final stamp on the city's harmony. It was merely the successful defense of the current state of fragile truce. Back in the bright, sterile light of the ZPD headquarters, Judy felt a quiet exhaustion that was different from the burnout after the Bellwether case. This fatigue was the natural consequence of constant, nuanced effort, the emotional labor of managing a deeply prejudiced society while simultaneously navigating the internal pressures of being a high-profile policing duo. Judy found herself increasingly focused on institutionalizing the lessons learned. She began spearheading internal workshops, not on law enforcement theory, but on bias recognition in policing, often using anonymized examples from their own cold case reviews. She insisted that the ZPD needed officers who understood the difference between a genuine threat and a reaction rooted in historical trauma, a concept that seemed abstract to many of the older herbivore officers. Her delivery was less strident than before. It carried the quiet authority of someone who had personally fractured and then painstakingly rebuilt a foundational belief system. Nick, surprisingly, became her most effective co-facilitator. He didn't need to lecture on prejudice. He embodied the counter-narrative. During one session, when an officer questioned the necessity of trusting a known informant, Nick leaned forward, his expression entirely serious, and explained, "Look, I know how to lie so well. It's an art form. If I'm telling you the truth now, it's because the consequences of lying are suddenly a lot worse than the rewards. That's not morality. That's good calculus. And that's what you need to look for in your suspects, too. What's their current calculus?" His ability to translate complex social dynamics into pragmatic, self-serving logic made his testimony incredibly persuasive to the more cynical members of the force, bridging the gap between the idealists and the pragmatists. Chief Bogo, seeing his officers finally engaging with difficult concepts, began to foster a climate of cautious experimentation. He quietly approved Nick's suggestion to establish a confidential, off-the-books liaison unit composed of reformed low-level criminals, the very creatures who understood how secrets were kept and manipulated in the city's margins. This was an acknowledgement from the very top that Zootopia could not be policed effectively from the center. It required understanding the periphery. Judy supported this, understanding that sometimes the law needed to operate in the gray areas to prevent the city from descending into the black and white savagery they had recently fought against. Their joint career path had fundamentally altered the ZPD, turning it from a reactive bureaucracy into a more adaptive, if still flawed organization dedicated to preemptive understanding. The rabbit and the fox were no longer just partners. They were the city's necessary corrective mechanism. The establishment of Nick's liaison unit, officially termed the Peripheral Intelligence Cell, was a quiet revolution within the Zootopia Police Department, a tangible outcome of Judy and Nick's successful navigation of political sabotage. This cell operated just under the radar, utilizing the street knowledge of reformed hustlers, petty thieves, and even a few disgruntled former information brokers who saw financial stability in cooperation rather than deceit. Judy insisted on strict ethical parameters. The cell could gather intelligence, but they could never engage in entrapment or illegal activity themselves. They were the eyes and ears, not the hands of enforcement. Nick, as the unit's cultural bridge and manager, found a genuine sense of purpose in guiding these skeptical recruits, his mentorship feeling like a direct repayment of the social debt he felt he owed the city for the second chance Judy had forced upon him. Their evolving professional roles often meant they were called upon to handle crises that blended the social and the criminal. When a series of highly sophisticated bank data thefts threatened to destabilize Zootopia's primary financial institution, the case demanded both meticulous auditing skills and an understanding of high-level deception. Judy took the lead on the forensic accounting side, her rigorous training allowing her to trace the digital breadcrumbs left by the perpetrators. However, the physical retrieval of the encrypted drives required Nick's specific brand of finesse. The thieves were using social engineering to gain physical access to secure vaults, relying on charm and assumed authority, Nick's old tradecraft. During the final sting operation, Nick didn't just outmaneuver the thieves. He understood their psychology, anticipating the ego-driven move they would make to secure their escape, leading Judy right to their exit point without firing a single shot. This constant high-stakes balancing act began to subtly influence their personal rhythms. Judy noticed a marked increase in Nick's diligence regarding procedure. He rarely left paperwork unfinished, a stark contrast to his former self. This wasn't fear of Bogo, but a conscious choice to embody reliability, to ensure no detail was left undone that could later be weaponized against him or his position. Conversely, Nick found that Judy was loosening up, allowing herself moments of genuine, unforced laughter in the precinct, particularly when Nick delivered a particularly sharp, dry observation about the absurdity of bureaucratic meetings. She was finally allowing the idealism to coexist with the reality, understanding that perfection wasn't the goal. Persistent, honest effort was. Their joint impact was evident during the annual Zootopia Unity Festival. Unlike previous years, which felt forced and superficial, this year's event, largely orchestrated under the guidance of the mayor's office, which had learned to trust their team, focused on genuine community interaction. Judy and Nick were positioned not at the main stage, but roaming through the diverse districts, the quiet presence of the bunny cop and the reformed fox serving as an unofficial security blanket. They weren't heroes being lauded. They were working officers demonstrating that the piece was not an accident of architecture, but the product of continuous, deliberate, and often uncomfortable engagement between predator and prey. Their shared patrol car, parked conspicuously yet unobtrusively at the intersection of Tundra Town and Sahara Square, symbolized that Zootopia's true harmony was found not in flawless unity, but in the functional, deeply respected partnership forged between two former outsiders. The vibrant, meticulously crafted world of Zootopia, a metropolis where predators and prey coexist, immediately establishes itself as a fascinating study in social allegory. The film cleverly uses anthropomorphic animals to dissect complex human issues, primarily prejudice, systemic bias, and the struggle for self-actualization within rigid societal expectations. Judy Hops, our protagonist, embodies the relentless ambition of an outsider, determined to break established norms. Her journey from the bucolic safety of Bunnyborough to the concrete jungle of Zootopia is less about geography and more about navigating the psychological landscape of a place that constantly tells her she is too small, too naive, and fundamentally unsuited for the job of police officer. Hops's professional aspirations are deeply rooted in a desire to prove the worth of the underestimated, fueled perhaps by generations of societal messaging that relegated rabbits to roles of simple domesticity or agriculture. Her relentless optimism, while initially charming, becomes a crucial catalyst for conflict. She fails to see the subtle, entrenched biases until she is directly confronted by them. This contrasts sharply with Nick Wilde, the seemingly cynical fox, whose entire career, a complex web of scams and survival tactics, is a direct response to the institutionalized distrust aimed at his species. Wilde's backstory, showing the childhood trauma of being branded a predator and symbolically muzzled, serves as a microcosm of how societal stereotyping can engineer self-fulfilling prophecies. His career as a hustler isn't a choice of immorality so much as a necessary adaptation to an environment that offers him no legitimate ladder to climb. The narrative tension escalates as Hops insists on tackling the mystery of the missing mammals, pushing past the precinct chief Bogo, a Cape buffalo whose own adherence to bureaucratic procedure reflects the weight of expectation placed upon authority figures of his predator class. Bogo's reluctance mirrors the institutional inertia that prefers keeping issues neatly compartmentalized, maintaining the perceived predator-prey balance rather than uncovering uncomfortable truths. The investigation forces Hops and Wilde into an uneasy partnership, a dynamic rich with friction. Their contrasting methodologies, Hops' textbook adherence versus Wilde's street-smart improvisation, gradually begin to complement each other. Wilde, initially exploiting Hops's naivete for profit, eventually reveals a capacity for loyalty, demonstrating that his sly reputation is merely a carefully maintained professional facade. The film's central thematic core is illuminated during the discovery of the carnivore reversion. This plot point acts as a brilliant, if sometimes heavy-handed metaphor for fear-mongering and scapegoating. When predators suddenly become unstable and dangerous, the latent prejudices held by the prey majority, particularly figures like Assistant Mayor Bellwether, surface dramatically. Bellwether, a seemingly mild sheep, orchestrates the crisis to seize power, leveraging the primal fear of the other. Her motivation isn't innate villainy, but a desire to redress perceived historical imbalances through manufactured insecurity, revealing that prejudice can originate from any quadrant of the social spectrum when power is at stake. Hops's subsequent press conference, where she unintentionally links the reversion to predatory biology, is the film's most critical moment of self-reckoning. Her words, born from exhaustion and a desire for simple answers, inflict deep damage on Wilde and the entire predator community. This mistake forces her to confront the limits of her own perspective. Her journey back to Bunnyburrow is not a retreat, but a period of necessary introspection. She realizes that achieving her dream of being a good cop requires understanding the systemic ways in which her own well-meaning actions can perpetuate the very biases she fights against. The resolution, built upon Wilde's essential understanding of human, or rather, animal nature, and Hops' genuine apology and commitment to systemic change, solidifies the film's optimistic, yet pragmatic, conclusion. Their successful partnership upon returning to the force shows that true integration requires not just shared space, but mutual vulnerability and the acknowledgement of past harms. Wilde's eventual embrace of a legitimate career, perhaps inspired by Hops's unwavering belief in his potential, signals a transformation achieved through earned trust rather than imposed acceptance. Zootopia ultimately succeeds by demonstrating that dismantling prejudice requires both the tenacious idealism of the newcomer and the lived, often painful, experience of the marginalized insider. The textural depth of Zootopia is what truly elevates it beyond simple children's fare. Consider the initial reaction of Chief Bogo to Judy's application. That moment is saturated with the palpable weight of institutional inertia. Bogo, a figure of immense physical presence, doesn't need to shout. His skepticism is conveyed through posture and the dismissive handling of her paperwork. He represents the old guard, perhaps subconsciously convinced that maintaining the status quo, the perceived order of predator dominance and prey subservience, is the safest route for the city's fragile peace. For Judy, this initial rejection isn't just a setback. It's a sharp, cold splash of reality against her fiercely nurtured idealism. She pours her entire being into the police academy, her small frame fueled by sheer, almost manic determination, visualizing success with the intensity of a born achiever who has always been told her physical reality contradicts her internal ambition. Then there is Nick Wilde, whose entire persona is a masterclass in controlled performance art. His profession is not merely hustling, it is a calculated, ongoing performance of the stereotype everyone expects of him. The way he interacts with tourists, utilizing exaggerated charm and a knowing glint in his eye, is the practiced ease of someone who monetizes his own marginalization. His emotional core, hinted at through the flashbacks of the childhood bullying involving the muzzle and the painful sting of betrayal, informs every subsequent interaction. He expects cruelty, and therefore, he preemptively constructs a defensive layer of sarcasm and self-interest. When Judy first tries to partner with him, her earnestness is an alien language to him. He treats her like a mark, someone easily fooled by the sheen of civic virtue. The chemistry between them blossoms precisely in the spaces where their worldviews collide. Judy's meticulous note-taking and adherence to procedure clash magnificently with Nick's ability to read subtle social cues, the unspoken language of the underbelly of Zootopia. When they infiltrate the rainforest district, the very environment serves as a sensory overload designed to test Judy. She, the champion of the open plains, suddenly finds herself physically and metaphorically suffocated by the chaotic, damp energy of the predator's habitat, relying entirely on Nick's intimate knowledge of the shadows and shortcuts. It is here that Nick stops playing the role of the opportunistic informant and starts exhibiting genuine protective instincts, an emotional investment born from witnessing a genuine spirit that hasn't yet been entirely jaded by the world's judgment. The descent into darkness when the missing mammals are found, the savage predators, inflicts a profound emotional wound on the city's carefully constructed truce. The panic is palpable, spreading through the populace like a highly contagious disease. Bellwether's ascendancy is a chilling portrait of opportunistic leadership fueled by historical grievance. Her gentle facade, that of a meek, easily overlooked sheep, is the perfect camouflage for ruthless Machiavellian ambition. She expertly manipulates the prey population's underlying anxiety, transforming latent suspicion into overt fear, turning the desire for safety into a hunger for segregation. Her dialogue to Judy, revealing her long-simmering resentment, underscores the idea that oppression can breed equal, if inverted, resentment in the oppressed, which can then become its own form of oppressive force. Judy's subsequent breakdown, the infamous press conference, is devastating because it is so authentically human. It's the collapse of a hero under the weight of her own unexamined assumptions. She uses the language of science and safety, but the impact is purely emotional and deeply prejudiced. Watching Nick's face in the aftermath, the slow crumpling of trust, the quiet confirmation of everything he believed about how the world views foxes, is the film's most potent moment of tragedy. It forces Judy to recognize that intent does not negate impact. Her subsequent actions, resigning and returning home, are not about admitting professional failure, but about confronting a moral failure. She let her own ambition blind her to the consequences of reinforcing stereotypes, even when speaking from a place of perceived righteousness. It is only through this humbling experience that she can return to Zootopia not as a naive idealist, but as a mature agent of change, ready to fight not just for her career, but for the integrity of the community she helped momentarily shatter. The transformation of Judy Hops from wide-eyed rookie to tested officer is marked by her relentless pursuit of validation, a desire that often overrides prudence. Her early motivation isn't just about law enforcement. It's deeply tied to an identity crisis, proving that a small rabbit can indeed occupy a space historically reserved for the physically formidable. This is why she volunteers for the most challenging assignment, the missing mammals case, effectively volunteering to face the systemic skepticism head-on. Her insistence on using official channels, her meticulously organized apartment decorated with reminders of her goals, speaks to an almost desperate need for external affirmation of her competence. In stark contrast stands Finnick, Nick Wilde's diminutive fennec fox associate. Finnick is a brilliant study in leveraging deceptive appearances. While Nick plays the charming con artist, Finnick often plays the vulnerable, often childlike figure, allowing them to manipulate interactions with greater emotional impact. A miniature mirror reflecting how society dismisses those it perceives as small or weak until they prove otherwise. Their scams are finely tuned performances that exploit the very biases Zootopia claims to have overcome. The relationship between Judy and Nick deepens through shared adversity in the perilous rainforest district. The atmosphere there is heavy, humid, a biological expression of chaos that threatens to overwhelm Judy's orderly nature. When they are nearly attacked by the large, agitated predators succumbing to the savage condition, Nick doesn't react with fear or aggression. He reacts with practiced calm, employing a specific, non-threatening vocalization and posture he learned in his youth, a technique designed to diffuse immediate danger from larger animals. This scene is where Judy sees past the hustler to the survivor, recognizing the complex trauma that shaped him. His instincts, honed by years of needing to read danger instantly, become their lifeline, revealing that his street education is far more nuanced than the precinct's formal training. Assistant Mayor Bellwether's scheme is fascinating, precisely because it capitalizes on the very real, suppressed anxieties of the prey population. Her initial persona, the slightly clumsy, underestimated sheep, is a performance of victimhood that earns sympathy. However, the chilling shift in her demeanor once she reveals her plan exposes a profound bitterness. Her narrative is one of long-term marginalization. She genuinely believes that only by actively asserting the dominance of the prey species, even through unethical means, can true equality ever be achieved. This suggests that suppressed anger, when denied constructive outlets, can calcify into a desire for inversion of the oppressive structure. The emotional climax of Judy's error, the press conference, is agonizing because it's an act of betrayal committed by someone whose intentions were ostensibly pure. She speaks, not as a cynical opportunist, but as a well-meaning friend trying to offer a simple explanation for a complex problem. The visual of Nick retreating, his posture shrinking, is the internalization of decades of societal messaging confirming his worst fears. It's the quiet acknowledgement that even the best intentions of an outsider can wield the sharpest weapons of prejudice. Judy's subsequent realization, scrubbing the city's posters that feature her triumphant image, is her penance. She must deconstruct the very myth of herself she worked so hard to build, understanding that earning a badge is secondary to earning the trust of the community, especially the community she accidentally wounded the deepest. Her eventual success is predicated on her willingness to admit fault, transforming her from a driven individualist into a true partner dedicated to systemic honesty. The resolution of the Zootopia crisis pivots not merely on uncovering Bellwether's conspiracy, but on the painstaking, emotionally fraught process of reconciliation between Judy and Nick. When Judy returns to the city, she doesn't arrive bearing immediate solutions or renewed, unchecked idealism. Instead, she carries the heavy burden of accountability. Her decision to seek Nick out at his dilapidated ice lolly stand, a symbolic return to the territory of his survivalist career, is a carefully choreographed act of humility. She has shed the polished uniform of the Academy star and approaches him as a peer seeking honest counsel, acknowledging that his lived experience within the system's blind spots grants him a perspective she simply lacked. Nick's initial reaction to her apology is guarded, steeped in the cynicism that protective layering affords. He challenges her, not out of malice, but to test the authenticity of her remorse. He needs confirmation that this isn't another well-meaning but ultimately superficial gesture from the establishment. The depth of their bond solidifies when Judy stops trying to convince him with platitudes, and instead admits the profound error in her own perspective, recognizing that fear is often the most contagious biological imperative. This mutual acknowledgement breaks down the final barriers. Judy accepts the reality of systemic prejudice, and Nick allows himself to believe that not everyone operates from a place of inherent distrust. Their joint effort to expose Bellwether in the final confrontation showcases their perfected synergy. Judy provides the tactical precision and the official mandate, utilizing her police training to anticipate security measures. Nick, however, provides the improvisation and the psychological insight necessary to bait Bellwether into revealing her true intentions. His ability to convincingly play the role of a panicked, targeted predator allows them to lure the assistant mayor into a trap where her own documented rhetoric can be used against her. This teamwork signifies the film's ultimate thesis. True progress is achieved not by replacing one dominant group with another, but by blending the tenacity of the driven outsider with the nuanced understanding of the insider who has navigated the margins. The final scenes depicting their renewed partnership within the Zootopia Police Department illustrate a cultural shift, albeit a fragile one. When Bogo, still wary but now respectful, assigns them joint tasks. It's a visual representation of the fragile detente they forged. Nick, in his neat police uniform, no longer looks like an imposter. He looks integrated, his confidence now rooted in legitimate authority rather than cunning. His career trajectory suggests a recognition by the department that street smarts and an understanding of the marginalized community are assets, not liabilities. Judy, meanwhile, has learned that being a good officer means championing truth over expediency, even when the truth, like the fact that predators are just animals susceptible to a biological trigger, is uncomfortable for her own community. Zootopia concludes not with the eradication of all prejudice, but with the establishment of a functional, evolving partnership capable of addressing bias as it arises, built on the difficult, earned trust between a determined rabbit and a very cautious fox. The legacy of Zootopia, as established through the narrative arc, resides heavily in the uncomfortable truth that systemic change is often catalyzed by personal failure and subsequent atonement. The film deftly avoids the simplistic resolution where all past biases vanish overnight. Instead, the ending underscores the ongoing nature of social integration. Think about the subtle reactions of the supporting cast upon Judy and Nick's return to active duty. Clawhauser, the cheerful cheetah desk sergeant, exhibits unreserved joy, symbolizing the segment of the population that genuinely desires harmony and is quick to embrace positive change, representing uncomplicated empathy. His career, seemingly dedicated solely to the administrative machinery of the precinct, acts as an emotional baseline. He is genuinely happy when the internal conflict subsides. Contrast this with the lingering unease in the background chatter among some of the other officers, perhaps a few of the smaller prey animals who were profoundly shaken by the savage outbreak. Their smiles might not quite reach their eyes. They are compliant. But the foundational trust Judy inadvertently fractured requires painstaking repair on a case-by-case basis. This speaks to the film's maturity. Individual apologies from heroes do not immediately rewrite collective memory or deeply ingrained fear. Judy's dedication to patrolling the tougher, less glamorous districts alongside Nick is her ongoing penance, a tangible commitment to rebuilding credibility from the ground up, specifically within the predator communities that felt most betrayed by her hasty generalization. Nick Wilde's success as an officer is perhaps the most nuanced victory. His adoption of the police uniform represents a reclamation of identity. For years, the uniform, or rather, the muzzle, was a tool of subjugation and branding. Now, wearing the official insignia, he subverts its original purpose. He is not merely conforming, he is occupying the space of power on his own terms, leveraging his intimate knowledge of criminal loopholes and societal deception to benefit law enforcement. His smirk now carries an edge of genuine authority rather than practiced deception. His career arc demonstrates that the most effective agents of reform often come from those who have mastered the system's weaknesses from the outside. The enduring message hinges on the dynamic between hope and realism. Judy Hops remains fundamentally optimistic, but her optimism is now tempered by Nick's grounded pragmatism. She brings the drive to revolutionize policy. He brings the acute awareness of how those policies might fail in practice due to ingrained human, or animal, nature. Their partnership evolves into a necessary symbiosis. Judy pushes the boundaries of what is legally and ethically possible, while Nick constantly checks her against the harsh realities of prejudice that he experienced firsthand. The quiet understanding between them, forged in the heat of crisis and cemented by shared vulnerability, serves as the film's ultimate optimistic beacon. That true coexistence is not a static state achieved through a single treaty, but a continuous, often messy dialogue between differing experiences. The final brushstrokes on the portrait of Zootopia's social landscape reveal a community defined by its complex, often contradictory, infrastructure. Consider the very architecture of the city itself. The deliberate segregation into environmental districts, Sahara Square, Tundra Town, Little Rodentia, is a physical manifestation of the societal partitioning Judy initially championed through her biased generalizations. Though the film resolves the immediate threat, the geographical separation remains, implying that while hearts and minds can begin to change, deeply ingrained habits and environmental preferences are harder to dismantle. Judy and Nick's collaboration, therefore, extends beyond police work. They become unofficial urban planners of social harmony, subtly encouraging interaction across these established zones. Hops's evolving sense of justice is intrinsically linked to her relationship with her parents back in Bunnyborough. Her parents represent the well-meaning, tradition-bound segment of society that holds deep affection for Judy, but clings to outdated stereotypes regarding predators. When they visit Zootopia, their interactions with Nick are fraught with nervous politeness, forcing Judy into the uncomfortable role of mediator between her past conditioning and her present reality. This continuous micromanagement of family expectations highlights that the battle against prejudice is not only fought in the high-stakes arena of city politics, but also across kitchen tables and living room sofas. Judy has to constantly educate those who love her most, proving that self-examination is a lifelong commitment. Nick Wilde's transition into law enforcement brings with it a new set of pressures. He is not just policing, he is constantly under a microscope, representing every fox who ever played the con. His successes are scrutinized more heavily than those of his peers. When he makes a minor procedural error, the audience, like the skeptical officers around him, instinctively waits for the real Nick to resurface. His ability to maintain his integrity stems from an internal shift. He no longer needs to hustle to survive. He now hustles to prove his worth to himself in a constructive way. The little tricks he used for scams, reading body language, knowing when someone is lying, are repurposed as invaluable investigative tools, transforming perceived moral flaws into professional strengths. The role of Gazelle, the pop superstar whose platform is radical inclusivity, is often understated but vital. She represents the aspirational, public-facing ideal of Zootopia. Her public appearances serve as powerful, unifying symbols, effectively counteracting the divisive messaging of fear-mongers like Bellwether. She is the voice of the majority who desire peace, providing the cultural narrative that supports the legal and police efforts of Judy and Nick. Her performance at the Resolution Rally is not just entertainment. It is a deliberate, massive deployment of positive cultural reinforcement, attempting to reset the emotional tone of the entire city after the trauma. Zootopia ultimately suggests that repairing a divided society requires not just ethical policing and political accountability, but also a concerted, visible effort from the cultural sector to champion unity, reinforcing the message that the city is, fundamentally, a place where anyone, regardless of their background, deserves the chance to make their mark. The ongoing societal negotiation within Zootopia is perhaps best exemplified by the evolving role of the Zootopia Police Department itself, moving from a mere reflection of existing social stratification to an engine of mandated integration. Chief Bogo's transformation, though subtle, is significant. Initially, the embodiment of gatekeeping, resistant to change because he valued stability above all else, his eventual acceptance of Nick Wilde is pragmatic rather than purely ideological. He recognizes, perhaps reluctantly, that the old guard's methods failed to prevent the Bellwether crisis. The crisis revealed a severe gap in understanding the city's undercurrents, a gap that only Nick, with his extensive, albeit unsavory education in the city's shadows, could fill. Bogo learns that true strength in leadership sometimes necessitates incorporating the very elements, the unconventional, the distrusted, that he once sought to keep at arm's length. His allowance for Nick to undergo standard police training, rather than simply appointing him an informant, signifies a crucial institutional pivot towards valuing varied expertise. Furthermore, the film subtly explores the economic implications of prejudice. Before the reversion scare, the economy likely favored the established species, perhaps inadvertently limiting opportunities for predators outside the realm of low-grade hustling or manual labor. Nick's entry into the force represents a significant economic shift for the marginalized, a high-status, well-paying, and legitimate career path opening up. This shift, replicated on a smaller scale across various sectors as the city seeks to prove its renewed commitment to fairness, is essential for systemic change. True equality demands equal access to aspiration, not just safety. If only prey animals can attain high-ranking respected positions, the superficial coexistence remains inherently unbalanced. Judy Hops, in her role as the conscientious officer, becomes an unexpected cultural ambassador. Her determination to engage with the diverse ecosystems of Zootopia, from the frigid tundra to the steamy rainforests, is more than a duty roster requirement. It is a deliberate act of cultural immersion. She actively seeks out the environments where prejudice festers most visibly, forcing herself and her partner to navigate sensory cues and social codes that she previously ignored. Her interactions with the sloth population, particularly Flash, provide moments of necessary, uncomfortable levity that still serve a thematic purpose. The slow pace of bureaucracy and understanding is often a barrier in itself, mirroring the slow pace of societal progress. These interactions underscore that stereotypes about slothfulness are just as limiting as those about predatory behavior. The ultimate success of Judy and Nick's partnership lies in their ability to anticipate and counteract the next potential fracture. They are no longer reacting to an external threat. They are actively managing the internal tensions of a diverse population that remains naturally suspicious. Their shared jokes now carry the weight of inside knowledge, a mutual understanding of how easily the lines between us and them can be drawn by fear, and how hard those lines are to erase. Their continued presence side by side in the precinct communicates a powerful, non-verbal message to every animal that walks through those doors. Reconciliation is possible, even if it requires constant, diligent effort from those who have been both hurt by and complicit in the system's past failures. The enduring power of Zootopia lies in its refusal to settle for a tidy fairy tale ending, opting instead for a depiction of an active, ongoing social contract. The relationship between Judy and Nick, now professional partners, becomes the microcosm for this societal balancing act. Their dynamic shifts from reluctant necessity to genuine mutually supportive interdependence. Nick, forever the connoisseur of human or animal nature, acts as the necessary ballast against Judy's occasionally zealous idealism. When Judy champions a new community outreach program aimed at bringing predator and prey children together, it is Nick who quietly points out the logistical and emotional hurdles, recalling specific anxieties he witnessed during the Savage outbreak, ensuring the program is designed with resilience, not just good intentions, in mind. Consider the silent narrative woven through Nick's interactions with his past associates, particularly the smaller criminals he used to run cons with. When they see him in uniform, the reactions range from awestruck reverence to deeply cynical mockery. Some see him as a sellout, someone who traded freedom for the shackles of the establishment. Nick handles these encounters with a newfound calm maturity. He doesn't need to perform for them anymore. His validation comes from within and from Judy, not from the approval of the hustler community he left behind. This demonstrates that redemption isn't about erasing one's past career, but about redirecting the skills acquired within that life toward constructive ends. Judy's professional growth is marked by her deepening appreciation for nuance, particularly concerning the concept of predator biology. Her early reliance on easy categorizations led to disaster. Now, she understands that biological imperatives, much like deeply ingrained cultural habits, can be managed, but perhaps never entirely extinguished. Her perspective moves from seeking to eliminate difference to learning how to manage difference responsibly within a shared structure. This is seen in her approach to Bogo. Instead of challenging his authority directly on ideological matters, she presents well-researched data demonstrating how diverse policing teams offer superior response rates, appealing to his core value: institutional effectiveness. The underlying tension of economic disparity is subtly addressed through the character arcs that follow the resolution. While Nick gained a high-status job, the film leaves open the question of whether the smaller, legitimate businesses owned by prey animals or less powerful predators saw similar opportunities flourish. The narrative implies that structural reform requires more than just arresting the main antagonist. It demands reallocating resources and dismantling the subtle economic barriers that keep certain species clustered in lower-earning professions. Judy and Nick's ongoing visibility serves to normalize these shifts, acting as living proof that excellence transcends species lines, thereby gently pushing employers citywide toward broader hiring practices. Zootopia, in its final depiction, is not a utopia achieved, but a democracy in the rigorous, necessary process of self-correction, propelled by the unlikely, indispensable partnership at its core. The exploration of inherited societal roles in Zootopia extends deeply into the motivations of the minor characters, serving as essential background textures to the main conflict. For instance, the family of Bonnie and Stu Hops, Judy's parents, functions as a powerful representation of well-meaning, yet restrictive, provincialism. Their intense pride in Judy's achievement is constantly undercut by their profound, almost instinctual fear of predators. Their meticulous packing of fox repellent and carrot cake for Judy highlights a generational anxiety. The fear they have successfully managed to avoid their entire lives is now embodied by their daughter's closest professional ally. This domestic tension forces Judy to constantly bridge the gap between the safety of the known, her farm life, and the necessary complexity of the urban ideal she strives for. Her exhaustion often stems from the need to simultaneously succeed in her dream job while ceaselessly defending that dream to the people whose approval she values most. Nick Wilde's development offers an even more potent commentary on the performance of identity. As he settles into police work, he begins to shed the protective layers of the hustler persona, but the residual habits are indelible. He retains an almost superhuman ability to spot a lie or an angle, skills honed through years of watching for predators in the metaphorical shadows of Zootopia's social structure. When he first interacts with the official precinct equipment, the radio, the official car, there is a noticeable, almost childlike wonder mixed with deep suspicion. He is testing the limits of his new legitimacy, half expecting the system to suddenly revoke his access, just as society revoked his childhood innocence. His loyalty to Judy solidifies because she is the first person to see the competence beneath the cynicism and validate it with the highest form of institutional trust: a badge and a partner assignment. The theme of systemic reinforcement is further examined through the sheer inertia of the city's infrastructure designed around assumed differences. The existence of separate climate zones within one city, Tundra Town, Rainforest District, is not simply world-building flair. It is a constant visual reminder of the city's initial failure to create a truly integrated social space. While Bellwether attempted to exploit the fear between these zones, the zones themselves represent a historical compromise where integration was too difficult, so compartmentalization was chosen instead. Judy and Nick's investigations often force them into these distinct territories, necessitating rapid shifts in behavior, language, and even gait, showcasing how deeply ingrained the social segmentation remains, even without active malicious intent from every resident. Finally, the resolution underscores that